delivering archives and digital objects, a conceptual model, or DadoCM, a minimal, system-agnostic framework that aligns digital delivery with archival principles. Designed for institutions of all sizes, DadoCM emphasizes aggregate description, integration with existing systems, and delivery tools from IIIF to PDFs and zip files. Following an introduction to DadoCM, participants will participate in a collaborative peer support exercise to encourage sharing of local experiences and solutions. We get to talk about digital archives. This interactive session focuses on aligning local archival practices and organizational needs with the ideals and requirements of DadoCM. Through peer consultations, attendees will explore practical steps to adapt and implement the model for their unique local context. Whether you're managing digitized content on a shared drive or building out IIIF delivery pipelines, this session offers a pragmatic, community-driven path towards cohesive, meaningful access. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk about DadoCM, which is a new conceptual model that came out of the ArcLight integration project, which is an IMLS-funded effort to better integrate ArcLight, ArchivesSpace, and digital objects. So what I'll do is I'll talk at the top about DadoCM, what it kind of does, what are the principles behind it, what are some of the pain points, and then we're going to do a peer consulting exercise. So we're going to get up, we're going to walk around the room, we're going to talk to some of our peers and about how we work with digital objects. So the problem that the Archives Integration Project is trying to solve is that archives often have two separate access points for their materials. They have we have our finding aid system, which most of the folks in this room are using ArchivesSpace for, whether or data managed in ArchivesSpace, and our digital repository or asset management system. While there's often links between these things, users get different functionality depending on which entry point they go in. So this doesn't really meet user needs, and also causes us major workflow issues as archivists, mostly for describing process materials. If you have a folder heading that's already processed and you want to digitize it and put it online for a user, oftentimes we have to add it to another system, sometimes re-describe it and then link it. So there's a lot of manual work that we don't really need to do in a perfect world. And this also doesn't really scale well, particularly when it comes to more digital records that often have some sort of pre-existing description, right? Archivists have really good processes for managing processing physical materials at scale, right? Sometimes we do detailed processing, sometimes we do less detailed processing, and we can make those decision points as they come up. But we have really a hard time doing this for more digital and digitized materials because our systems don't really allow us the spectrum of choice. So, and I want to focus that these don't have to be separate interfaces. So, a little bit of the end goal is the implementation that we're doing at Albany. I'm not showing this as this is perfect or this is this still has some significant limitations, but the idea is that it doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to have these two separate entry points. So now, this is our implementation of ArcLight, which takes data from our digital materials as well as data exported from ArchivesSpace, our archives description. So if I click here, this is basically our finding aid description. It has the ArcLight grouped view, and also you can facet only by digital content. And then you get direct on materials. And most of this at the top is from titles of folder headings and such. But as we go down, it also has full text in here. So when we click on each thing, you get the digital object right in there within that archival context. So you get the digital materials within the context of the description that we have in ArchivesSpace, the data that we're managing in ArchivesSpace. So it doesn't necessarily have to be this way. We don't have to have these two separate things. But the major problem we came across in trying to develop this is that we don't have any standard or common guidelines for digital object records. And this is what we use to link to digital objects from finding aids or ArchivesSpace digital object records. Because there was no community guidelines or path forward for this when ArchivesSpace was first developed, it never really had a clear plan for digital object records. It does so many different, or enables you to do so many different things. You can put checksums in it. You can add historical notes to digital object records. These things are not really compatible, but so that means all of us are probably using the digital object records for very different things, and all of our digital object records are widely inconsistent, and that makes it really hard to build systems or common processes around that. So what we did first as part of this effort was we need a common model to build systems around of what we're trying to accomplish with our digital object records. So DadoCM emerged from this effort. Since we had some grant money, we had a competitive process to bring in a 20-member cohort remotely last year, and then earlier this year we had an 8-member subset that we brought to Albany to do some working meetings to develop a new way of doing this. So we had archivists with a variety of backgrounds and experience levels, and what was exciting is everyone made a contribution, and we got what I think is a really cool deliverable out of that. So DadoCM, or Delivering Archives and Digital Objects, is a high-level conceptual model. It's focused on what do we do when we're linking digital objects within our archival description. It is a RFC, or request for comments style proposal. These are kind of similar to what the specifications that drive the development of the internet and web, email, and things like that. So it's just a model that you can follow if you would like. It's designed to be system-agnostic. So while we're at Albany using it in an ArchivesSpace and ArcLight context and IIIF context, the idea is that it defines the structure of our data in whatever system. So you could theoretically implement this only with an ArchivesSpace. You can implement this with a number of different tools. But hopefully the data underneath of it is roughly structured in a consistent way that we can have common processes around it. It's focused on supporting the delivery of digital objects that are referenced in the description. So what does DadoCM say a digital object record is supposed to do? It's supposed to tell us where to find digital objects, their identifier, characterize the nature of what digital objects are, tell us how a system should render these digital objects for delivery, and why they may not be accessible. So some of the principles around DadoCM. We are going to manage our archival description in digital objects without duplication, but not necessarily in one system. There's not really a one off-the-shelf system that does all of our needs, so how do we work with these multiple systems? One of the principles is we need to maintain our connection with the archival component with the digital object. So if you digitize something that's described in ArchivesSpace, at least maintain that connection in an automated way, whether it's taking the URI or the ref ID from ArchivesSpace and associated with that digital object record, or do something to maintain that connection. DadoCM also focuses on access over management or preservation. So one of the inconsistencies of how we use digital object records is some of us use them for managing digital materials or preserving them. What DadoCM is solely scoping to how do we fulfill access to materials. So that kind of scopes out a lot and makes this kind of feasible. Another principle of DadoCM is we want to describe and provide access to aggregations of digital materials at the point they're self-describing. So that means for particularly more digital materials, they come with a lot of pre-existing metadata, whether that's just the file name and the file extension. That is really useful. So what we want to do, just like we do with paper records, is we don't necessarily always have to describe at a really detailed item level. We want to pass it off to users at a level that they can explore the materials. That can be just putting a pile of digital records in a zip file. There's an aggregation of that self-describing materials potentially, and maybe we describe the zip file, but let the users inside the zip navigate inside the zip file. So probably one of the biggest pain points for implementation is that DadoCM defines digital objects as manifestations of archival components, or archival objects in ArchivesSpace parlance. So that means they have a one-to-one relationship. So this is going back to what the reality was in EAD 2002, where ArchivesSpace right now, you can have multiple digital objects for your archival objects. DadoCM is saying that we should have one archival object, and the digital object is the link to where that is, basically. But that doesn't mean they have to be single things. Since archival components are aggregates, they're groupings of materials, so can digital objects be. So that clarifies the relationship so we can build systems around it, and makes it really clear that the archival object is the description, and the digital object is the thing we're describing. But this offers a lot of practical implementation barriers to considering our common practices. So two things that are not in the model that we talked a lot about in our cohort meetings are coverage, because they're manifestations of the archival component, they should have the same scope. That is often not the case for our digital materials, right? So we often have parts of things. So one way we can do that in a legacy perspective is use something like coverage. That's not ideal. DadoCM thinks that is not ideal. We eventually don't want to have some parts of our components that we're going to. We want the scope to be consistent, but for now we can kind of link to different, this is kind of a path or stepping stone. Another thing that's not in the model is digital object level descriptive metadata. We probably have a lot of descriptive metadata attached to our digital objects. DadoCM says that this description metadata should probably be attached to the archival component and not the digital object, but in reality, we're going to have that data. So it offers some techniques that we can feed this and still make use of that digital object metadata from a legacy perspective. But hopefully the idea is it gives us a goal and point to work towards while still managing with the realities that we're faced with. So what is a DadoCM digital object record? So it has an archival component relator, so that just means a connection with the digital object and the archival object. An identifier, which might just be a URL, an identifier label, and that's for very simpler implementations for when you're just linking to a thing, so you just want some human readable link text. I'll talk a little bit about type and action, and conditions governing access. Representative sample is just a thumbnail or a clip, and this is also extensible. So in DadoCM says that this is what it should look like, but it doesn't say what it should only look like. So if you have to add more fields to your digital object records for your local context, that's totally fine. So for these type and action records, they are kind of based on the old Xlink that shows what a digital object is and how a system should render it. So it could tell a system that this is a PDF and you should either link to it or embed it. Or this is a IIIF manifest, we should try to embed this, or just link to a JPEG. So we have a variety of different choices based on these two things, and it's also something that's actionable for us, the archivists, to control how a system is displaying and rendering our digital objects. Condition governing access is the main use case here is that we have digital materials that might not be publicly accessible or might be behind a paywall, even if it's not paid or some sort of login. So we need to transfer these materials to our access system. So what we found in our cohort meetings is that this is just a conditions governing access node. This is the same thing we have done as archivists previously, but we need a machine actionable version of it. So that's what DadoCM says that we should have. So what a DadoCM digital object record could look like in ArchivesSpace. Well, the first thing, ArchivesSpace already covers it. It already makes that connection between the digital object and the archival component. That's all. An identifier is just a single file version, or like a representative file version. Identifier level could be title. There's not really a good field for type. The action, there's not a great field, but the Xlink show attribute is kind of in the same spirit. Conditions governing access, there you can inherit this from the archival component as well. The main issue now is that there is a machine actionable conditions governing access in ArchivesSpace, but it's a little more complicated and not necessarily aligned with this, so that is a little bit hard to implement. And then representative sample, which might just be another file version. So it's a little messy in implementing this in ArchivesSpace. So what could we do to actually implement DadoCM in ArchivesSpace so it's a lot more cleaner and while still dealing with the realities of all this data that we have that is not ideal set up the way DadoCM recognizes. So one idea that I was thinking of is having another digital object record just for access and fulfillment. So instead of leaving the existing digital object record that we manage a lot of our legacy data, but having this other option that we could, as a stepping stone, migrate our data to over time as we're able to. So that might be a much, much simpler version of the existing digital object record. It would have a required identifier and file version, an optional label, and then these type and action fields that we can use control values, and then representative sample. So it could be a very much more simplified version of the digital object record. The other thing we probably need is some minor alterations to the conditions governing access node, so we can have a very simple normalized field for that as well. And this would let us kind of local implementators to migrate towards DadoCM over time as it benefits them. So, I've talked a little bit, but now what I really want to do is get us talking to each other, because we all have a lot of different realities when it comes to digital objects. We have a lot of different limited choices and limited technology support as we make them and navigate how we manage digital objects. So I think it's really best to kind of help each other in navigating some of these choices. So I want to acknowledge that all of us have ongoing data issues that we wish could be better. All of us lack technology support, even the ones of us that are better resources, we can always have more support. So implementing DadoCM is not something that we want to make that, it's not the expectation is that we're going to move all of our data to tomorrow. This is going to be a long-term goal that we can adapt to over time. So, but what can we start doing now? What principles can we kind of use these principles to make good choices now, to make our data future-proof? One idea is just connecting our digital materials with ArchivesSpace identifiers in a machine actionable way is something that maybe we can do in our local context that will help us in the future rather than having, because I know we do have a lot of digital object records that are described in ArchivesSpace somewhere, we don't know exactly where. So maintaining those connections now might help us make these choices in the future. So what I'd like to do is have everyone get organized. So what we're going to do is everyone's going to stand up and we're going to find groups of 3 people. Feel free to move around the space, get away from the tables, and we're going to kind of talk to our peers. I encourage you all to mix it up. Hopefully we have a variety of different levels of experience in these groups and different local contexts. So if you are working with the person next to you or talk to them a lot, try to switch it up, meet some new people, walk around the room. So we'll get up and take a minute to do that, and hopefully we'll find a group. It'll work out that we're mostly in groups of 3. So it looks like we're this exercise we're going to kind of define an order, and the idea of this is that there would be 1 client and 2 consultants, and this will rotate. So when we get started, I'll ask you to pick who goes first, basically, but the model is whoever's the client first will explain their local situation to their consultants and how their local situation with digital objects. Their consultants are going to make some suggestions, and then this will rotate twice, so everyone is the client in your small group. So before we get to that, I want to stop and consider yourself for about 2 minutes. What are some of the things that I can do to improve how we manage digital objects locally in our space or our local context? And can the principles of DadoCM help us manage our digital objects? So before we get started, kind of even silently or take some notes to yourself, think about this problem.